Hello, everyone. This is part 1 of session 16 of Pre-Socratics to Augustine, also called History of Philosophy 1. We are now transitioning from Plato to Aristotle. And I want to take that as an occasion to reflect a little bit on the fact that Plato writes dialogues. Now, often people think that there is some kind of connection to Plato's teacher, Socrates. Socrates did not write anything. He had conversations with people. And presumably that has something to do with the idea that we encountered in the Republic, where Glaucon and Adeimantus asked Socrates, what do you think the good is? And Socrates says, no, I'm not going to tell you my doxa, my belief, because beliefs without knowledge, as you know, are shameful and ugly. So I just don't want to lay out a view as if I knew what I was saying when I really don't have the knowledge. So, of course, like everyone else, I have some thoughts about it, but I don't want to put them forward as assertions. And you might think that the whole kind of format of Plato's writings responds to that kind of concern. Plato is not putting forward proposals that are kind of asserted as, this is how I think it is. Here are my reasons. Here are my arguments. Rather, he is giving you these rich settings where interlocutors exchange ideas, where people make proposals, others raise objections. Often several proposals get refuted. Often we learn something along the way without necessarily therefore having a complete theory of something. So, and some of Plato's dialogues are more, as we discussed, aporetic, simply ending in, we have not found a definition of X, whatever it was that we were looking for. Other dialogues like the Republic do put forward quite a lot of ideas. Nevertheless, they are not put forward in the form of treatises. Now, the method of inquiry that involves question and answer, and that involves arguments that are raised from several sides, is often called dialectic. It's a difficult question, sort of more technically speaking. What is Plato's notion of dialectic? That is also contested with respect to different dialogues, and probably the notion of dialectic also develops over time as Plato writes also the later dialogues, which we haven't studied. But importantly, dialectic is one name for at least some dimensions of this method, where you're not laying out a positive view, but you engage in inquiry that involves some kind of back and forth between someone asking questions, someone making a proposal, here is some objection, here's a revised proposal, and so on and so forth. As we now turn to Aristotle, we turn to the first philosopher in the Western tradition who, in some sense, writes in a format that is recognizable for us today. He writes about a given topic or a given question in a given text, and he does lay out his own positive proposal. But I want to invite you to think about Aristotle's method insofar as it still has traces of the Socratic, Platonic, dialectical endeavor. And that is why we start our study of Aristotle with 2 chapters from the Topics. The Topics are one of several short treatises that make up jointly Aristotle's so-called Organon. That is a set of treatises, writings, which in one way or another have something to do with method, with argumentation, with how to go about inquiry. And the literal translation of organon, the Greek word organon, is tool. So you can think of these writings as a toolbox. They are your toolbox for inquiry. And we are starting our study of Aristotle by just looking at the first 2 chapters of the Topics, which is one of the short treatises that make up the Organon. And there Aristotle says something that is really famous, and that is a kind of blueprint of the method of a lot of his writings. Not of everything, and often kind of mixed with other methods and so on, but it does bear importantly on Aristotle's method. So the proposal is that it is a goal, it is a good thing to be able to make arguments, inquire about, think about, puzzle about any topic whatsoever. And that involves practicing this kind of argumentation. And this kind of practicing involves making arguments or exploring positions from both sides. That is a famous phrase in Greek, pros ampotera, to be able to argue, as it were, in both directions. And then as you investigate something, as you examine some question, some topic, Aristotle suggests that you do the following. You engage with the views that everyone holds, with the views that many people hold, and with the views of the wise people. And collectively, he calls those three types of views Endoxa. That is a Greek term, the translation of which is quite contested among scholars. One translation that has been defended by Jonathan Barnes and that a lot of people find somewhat plausible is that Endoxa are reputable opinions. Now, what makes something a reputable opinion is precisely either that pretty much everyone thinks so, or that many people think so, or that some wise person thinks so. Now, what would be examples for that? You might think that both Plato and Aristotle think that many people think that pleasure is the good. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, many people write a treatise about what is the good and they have a theory of pleasure or anything like that. It can be implicit. It can be that the behavior of people suggests that somehow they think that pleasure is the good. So both Plato and Aristotle think that as a philosopher, you have to engage with the view that pleasure is the good, simply because it looks like a lot of people think that. But you also have to engage with views that are quite unconventional, if a wise person, someone like Socrates, holds them. Because, even if that is quite counterintuitive, what Socrates says on a given issue, even if it is paradoxical, but it's Socrates who says it. Hence, we ought to think about it. And then there is the idea that there are even views that everyone holds. And here's your little homework assignment for today. Try to come up with an example for a view that you think everyone holds.